Hey everyone, welcome to another meeting of the Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group. My name is Mike Kanakis. My co-host here is Phil Bossman, and tonight we're going to be talking about managing SNMP and exploring SNMP data with PowerShell. And so, who's our guest speaker tonight?
Is the super famous Stevie Coaster. The man, Stevie Valdinger, is just known as Stevie Coaster. If you see him anywhere, it's Stevie Coaster. And we want to welcome Stevie Coaster to the group. Hey, Stevie. There he is. Look at him. He's already in Mars. He's already made it all the way to Mars. He's at his own place. Yeah. Love to have you. As you see, he's got his chocolatey shirt on, so he works. His day job is at Chocolatey, basically writing scripts and solving the world's problems, right?
Yeah,
Pretty much. Yeah.
And Stevie is a well-known PowerShell community member, all-around good guy, and just willing to dive in and help people with PowerShell problems. He's a frequent contributor to our group. We're very happy to have him here today. Stevie, thanks for presenting again for us today. And so we're going to get started here in 1 minute. If you are watching at home on YouTube, we just want to give you a little idea of what to expect tonight. So what you're witnessing is a live in-person demo by Stevie to a room full of about 15 people and about 85 people that are online in a meeting. And so this is an interactive demo. We encourage our people who attend the meetings, whether they're in person or on remote, to ask questions and to challenge Stevie on the things that he's doing. And so I say that because they're not always fully finished, polished demos. We go wherever the questions take us. And so we hope you understand that. If you'd like to join us for a meeting, you can find us at rtpsug.com or on Meetup, the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. We'd love to have you join us in person so that you can ask questions of our speakers and hang out with us. With that said, I think we'll turn it over to Stevie.
Cool.
All right, Mr. Stevie, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just real quick before we get started, I'm very excited. I got coasters in the mail today for Summit with my face on them. So if you're going to be at Summit this year, find me. I've got a whole couple stacks of these things. Very, very excited. Love swag. All right, let's grab some screen shares over here as soon as I find the right button. And let's share the screen. All right. So who am I? They've kind of introduced me already. Stephen Valdinger. I'm a support manager at Chocolatey Software. I wear a couple of hats at Chocolatey. I manage the support team. I manage solutions engineering team as well. So whether you're a customer with a support issue, my team helps you with that, or you're a customer coming to us with a professional services need, maybe you need some help integrating Chocolatey into a disparate system, or you don't have time to write the PowerShell code to do what you need to do, you want to hire us to do that, I manage that team as well. And you can find me across all my social medias at Stevie Coaster, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and LinkedIn. I don't do the Mastodon, any of that other stuff. There's no time for that. So you can find me at Stevie Coaster anywhere else. And what are we going to talk about tonight? Oh boy, are we in for a treat. Let me tell you, this is interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. But first, a slight joke. What do you get when you let politics into technology? You get this thing called the Simple Network Managing or Monitoring Protocol, or SNMP. It's a very, very old protocol. It's been around since 1988, if you can believe it. Started way back then when the internet was really starting to get its sea legs under it, right? When we were starting to see ARPANET come to life and all these things, and all of a sudden we had dial-up internet. People were connecting to BBSs all across the country. We started to have all this different switching gear that came to life, and we needed a way to manage this stuff, right? So a bunch of really smart people got together and were like, we need something really simple to be able to control these devices, to understand what's going on. We need to solve this problem. And Simple Network Monitoring Protocol is born. And it's been around ever since. And it's actually really, really interesting. It's kind of a pain in the butt to manage, to be honest. But if it's got simple in the name, you kind of expect it to be a pain in the butt because, it's just how things like this go. So, what drives SNMP, right? What's the big deal? Everything has an OID. That's the whole thing behind SNMP is this OID, and it defines and describes a part inside of a piece of equipment and the value that that part currently has, whether that's a power supply and a switch, or a fan and a switch, or a humidity sensor attached to an environmental monitoring appliance, or how much toner is left in your printer, or how many pages that of letter that copier or printer is printed over its lifetime. All this stuff is defined inside of SNMP as an OID. So you'll see these all over the place, and they have friendly names, but they are also numerically defined as well. And the numerically defined way of doing things is kind of my preference. It's easier to understand it as numbers as opposed to like names, because the names are really, really weird. But when you start looking at SNMP, you'll notice that they kind of all start with this same number, this dot one, dot three, dot six, dot one, dot four, dot one. So what does that actually mean? So the dot one, the leading dot one is the ISO body, the thing that kind of drives the standard, right? And then they start breaking it down. The three means that an org is going to be specified. The six literally means the Department of Defense, because the Department of Defense is really one of the main drivers behind the creation of SNMP because of ARPANET, right? The internet was formed as part of the military way back in the day, and this is when this all started. So it makes sense that the Department of Defense would be kind of involved in SNMP. So that's what that dot six means. When we start moving further down the OID, we can see that the dot one means it's going to be a network connected device, or an internet connected device. A dot four is going to mean that it's a private entity that has manufactured that device, so a company. And then the dot one at the end is going to be that it's an enterprise. So it's a private enterprise that has manufactured this device. So it doesn't matter if she buys something from Cisco, from Ubiquiti, from Extreme, from Aruba, from whatever. If it supports SNMP, dollars to no nuts, things are going to start with dot one, dot three, dot six, dot one, dot four, dot one. That's just how it is with this kind of things. And then once you get past that, it kind of becomes the Wild West a little bit, because after that you've got the number that's been given to like the manufacturer. So Cisco's going to have a number that's their number after dot one, and then they're going to break. And then after that, it's kind of up to them to come up with the numbers for this is a switch, this is a wireless access point, this is a whatever, and then further on down the line to kind of understand or to kind of define what that device is and all the different pieces and parts that you can monitor. And because of all those pieces and parts that you can monitor, your observability and your monitorability go way, way up. When I was back in public life, back when I was working at the university, we had thousands of checks running all over the place using SNMP, from toner and printers across the campuses, across all the buildings, so that when a toner went to like a certain threshold, we'd get a ticket, we'd send somebody to fix it. Nobody had to call us. Like, we just knew that toner needed replaced, and we let it run really, really, really low, so we weren't replacing a toner at like 20% empty. It was like 5%, we'd get a warning, 3%, we'd change it, stuff like that. But using SNMP, we were also able to automate the counter reports that we had to do for the lease that we were on. So every month, the leasing company needed to know how many pieces of paper came through all the printers. I didn't want to walk around every building on campus and collect counter information from every single copier we had because we had a bunch. If I didn't want to do it, I didn't want to make a student tech do it. And the people that actually contacted the leasing office, they weren't going to do it. So I went ahead and I just automated it. Using SNMP, I was able to determine what OIDs were corresponding to the counters inside of the web UI, so that I was able to query that stuff with PowerShell. And because it was PowerShell, I could get objects back and then create Excel spreadsheets out of everything and send it off to the business office every month. And yes, Brian, I can see your chat. You used to be the student tech. Thank you, by the way. So let's dive into this a little bit and let's start to really look at what it takes to query SNMP. So we're going to start with this demo. And let's see, we'll do some printer stuff first. So, and actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll do it this way. Let me see. I'm going to copy this. And then we'll put this down here on the terminal. And then we will do this. And we'll just grab this capacity. So I've got a printer on my network here at home that I use maybe once a year when I have to print out my city tax returns, and then it sits empty, right? So if we look at this, what we're going to do, and can everybody see my terminal down here okay? Do I need to change the font or anything? Is it good? Because I can switch things up if I need to. But
It's visible.
okay, so
Oh, so the a little larger. Somebody has to have it a little larger. That's good. Thank you.
All right, cool, awesome. So I'm going to run this, and actually, what it's going to do is going to want to know where to go to get it. So 2.168.1.20 in there. All right. So what does this mean? So this is that letter nonsense. Like this is the non-number representation of that OID, and it's an integer. So the type is an integer, and it is currently set to a value of 12,000. So the capacity of the drum unit in my toner is 12,000 pages. It can print over its lifetime a max of 12,000 pages. Well, that's interesting. How many pages have I printed? What's left? You know, what's the life left? So we can figure that out. We can query this other OID. Just back this up. And then we can get that, right? So, and then we'll get into this a little bit later. But then you can start calculating percentages and things like that. So if you do if you do that same thing with this and then you do some math on it, it comes out to 91%. Is what that math equates. So right now the drum unit in my printer is at 91% capacity. Pretty good. It's been at 90 some percent for freaking years because I print 3 pages a year. It's going to last longer than I will probably. But that's the kind of stuff that you can do with SNMP. And it is interesting too that a lot of the big manufacturers, if you're not really into SNMP and want to do the discovery and things like that, a lot of the big manufacturers produce what are called MIBs, which are basically just databases of all the stuff that they currently or that they produce. So I've got this is iReasoning's MIB browser. It's pretty good. I've used it before. They've got a Windows version and a Mac version. Since I'm on a Mac, I use that one. But you can load in different ones. So if we load MIBs into this thing, let me see. We've got a Cisco 2900 switch that I've downloaded, and I've just grabbed a couple of different things. But if we look and we dive into this, you can see this is all the stuff that you can actually peek and poke at inside of SNMP. And if you click on the different things, it gives you like what the value is for the OID, and sometimes it'll give you a brief description, sometimes it won't. It's kind of annoying like that. What else? So
Stevie?
Yeah.
You just mentioned you just said the word poke, and I was wondering if it's possible to use this to change a value out there rather than just read it.
You can, yes. So you can do that. I don't have any devices on my local network here that support me doing that. I wanted to get a Cisco Catalyst 2960 that I have in my network rack working, but I can't find my freaking Cisco cable. So I think I'm going to have to order it before Summit so I can have that device up and running and demoable while I'm in Bellevue. But something like that, yes, you can set certain configurations with SNMP as well. But
so you could
typically you don't.
You couldn't change the remaining for this particular printer to something that would be
Correct.
$11,999.
Correct. Yeah. The values, like the OID itself, has to support being set.
Right.
And typically they're read only. Like 90% of a OID tree is read only. And you can get a lot of information. Like if I were to SNMP walk my printer, for example, and sometimes it times out because it's a consumer grade thing, then you have to do, yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Sometimes you have to poke this thing a couple of different times before it'll actually go. 2.168.1. Did my IP address change all of a sudden? That doesn't make sense because I just pinged it.
Anyone sleep?
Yeah, probably did. Yeah, I don't even know what it's called. Local? Maybe? Is that what it's called? I don't know. I think it did go to sleep on me. I'm going to hit a web interface real quick because I do want to see that work. There it is. That would be my luck that printer stops responding the night I need it. It's interesting that it stopped responding because that worked. So why is it dead all of a sudden?
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Well, I would, but it's very far away from me at the minute, and that is no bueno.
Have you tried sending Ryan to turn it off and on again?
I should. Hey, Ryan. Yeah, this is bizarre, guys. I don't know what's happening to my printer. I can't get it to connect. Well, let's do this.
I broke the printer.
Yep, you asked the wrong question.
It was the right question, just the wrong time.
There we go. All right, this looks better. So this is actually Windows Server. Windows Server supports being monitored by SNMP as well. You can install the SNMP agent as a service on Windows Server, and then you can get all kinds of fun stuff, including if we were to walk, and let's change something here. So we're going to switch this over. We're going to add some parameters to this so that I can get back the numbers instead. And we're gonna go, that is all that, right? Oh, it's probably not going to show me what I want. Yes, it is. There we go. So I'm going to grab this OID here. From this OID, what we can do is we can start to walk from right there. So if we paste this in, it's going to give me basically what's in programs and features on this server. So you can query like the installed software that's on a box as well. You can get it like the current processor load. You can get it the disk space. You can do all that stuff via SNMP on Windows Server. Why you would ever do that, because of things like SIM and WMI and other things, I don't know, but it's there if you need it. Like if you want to play with SNMP and you've got Windows, just install the SNMP feature and you can play with it all day long. It's kind of cool. This is all kind of cool, but let's start making this PowerShell, right? Like it's a PowerShell user group. We should probably do some more PowerShell-y things. So we're going to make this work. We're going to turn SNMP Walk, the CLI tool, into start SNMP Walk, a PowerShell commandlet. And to do that, we're going to flip over to this Crescendo folder and start looking at PowerShell Crescendo. So PowerShell Crescendo is a relatively new thing from the PowerShell team that does exactly that. It takes a command line CLI, something like SNMP walk or ping.exe or ipconfig.exe or netsat, whatever, and turns that into a PowerShell commandlet that you can get objects back with. It's very, very cool. They keep working on it. It gets better and better and better every time they do a release. The most recent version has some nice features in it, and that you now can like add filtering parameters to your commandlets that you create. So before, you could do something like list all your vagrant boxes on your machine, but you couldn't like have a name parameter to get specific boxes, or you couldn't have a type parameter that would list out only Ubuntu boxes or something like that natively on the commandlet. You would have to pipe it to something else like where object or select object to do that filtering. It's very kind of anti-pattern to PowerShell. And I kind of raised a little bit of a stink about it and went back and forth with Jason Helmick a bit, and he agreed, and they got it in there and it shipped. So now you can do that filtering by adding parameters to the commandlet. So they do listen to the community, and they do get releases out, not super frequently, but every time they do a release, it's got some major pain points with using the module fixed. So every time they do a release, I get even more excited about it, and it's to the point now where I have a lot of fun doing it. There's still some UX type stuff that I would like to see done a little bit better, but again, they keep working on it. It keeps getting better, and I'm excited to see where they take it into the future.
Well,
So
Stevie,
thankfully,
let me just interrupt
go
you for
for
a
it.
second. I think it's just a fair comment to make, just to build on what you said. Probably the reason releases don't come out that so fast is because of the scale they're writing code for, right? So they're not just they're not going to release something that's hacky, right? So
Yeah,
that team is putting a lot of work into making sure that they're releasing runnable code that doesn't blow up in your face, and so they really do a good job. But Stevie's point is really well taken, which is that team, the PowerShell team, puts a lot of effort into trying to listen to the community and in ingesting our suggestions. So If you have an idea for a way to improve their tools, you just need to find a way to get in touch with them, and they are willing to listen.
Yes,
Is Jason
absolutely,
Melnick,
100%.
Crescendo?
He's PM for I think he's moving over to Azure, but he's PM for
Yeah, he's a
PowerShell, the whole thing.
yeah, he's kind of in charge of. He kind of Crescendo's his baby, basically. Jim Truer is the guy on the PowerShell team that wrote a lot of the code for Crescendo, but Jason is kind of the one that champions it in public, if you will. I'm sure that Jason is going to have an update for us at Summit this year about Crescendo, for example. He likes to talk about Crescendo at the Summit, so I'm sure there'll be some new thing coming out with it by the time April rolls around. But they do have some really, really nice commandlets for authoring Crescendo modules, because this thing is it's all a JSON file at the end of the day. So this thing creates a JSON file that you then ingest with another commandlet, and it creates a module for you. Well, we're going to walk through it, and you'll kind of understand as we go here. Oh, and as luck would have it, just to be funny, my printer just came back online, so that's good. We're going to do that in a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this line here, and this is going to create a command object for us. And if we take a look at that command object, we've got our function name, our original name, and our description is kind of all that's shown by default. But if we select star this guy, all the properties of a command inside of the JSON schema are actually emitted, and then you can kind of start to build on these things. We can SNMP walk dot elevation equals true, or whatever we need to do. So, and as we get further and further in here, you can start to see how you can build things and put this together relatively simply. So the first thing that we need to do is get that object for our command. What commandlet are we going to make? In this example, we're going to make start SNMP walk, and this is going to wrap what CLI tool is this going to be a commandlet that executes? This is going to be a tool or a commandlet that's used to wrap the SNMP walk command. Pretty straightforward. And then we need some parameters for this thing too, right? Because up until this point, we've been doing SNMP walk, and we've been giving it a version, and then we've been giving it some more parameters. This is the output type. We're going to say all numbers. We're going to give it a community name, which is the string that allows the communication to happen. You can change this thing. By default, it's public. And then what device do you want to talk to? Either IP address or FQDN. And then optionally, what OID do you want to start walking or get specifically? So those are all the parameters that we're going to require here. So we start building those things in an array. So the first thing we're going to build is that version parameter, and then we're going to give it the CLI tool equivalent. So on the CLI, we need -v, and you'll notice there's no space between -v and the 1. It doesn't work like that. And for the community name, it's -c. There is a space on that one, and we'll come to that in a second. And then there's some other optional parameters that we need, or some other parameters that we need, but they don't have an equivalent like -c on the command line. There's no parameter for these things. You just give a value. So in this case, I'm going to pass the original name as null. So there is no original name. Once we do that, and if I'm going like 1,000,000 miles an hour and somebody needs me to stop and go back over something, please, Mike or somebody, shout at me, and I can take this slow. I'm going to go back over the JSON once we're to that point, and we have that generated just to kind of catch everybody up. But getting into Crescendo is kind of hard, or it's a lot to wrap your head around. So once we have our parameters defined, we need to have something that takes the output of the CLI tool and turns it into a PowerShell object for us. And thankfully, PowerShell is really good at parsing data. So what I'm going to do is I wrote a really quick and dirty regex that helps me parse the output of SNMP walk. So if we look at this, and if I run this, you can start to see that it's pretty standard stuff. We've got the OID, and then we've got an equal sign, and then we've got a type and a colon, and then the value. So we can start to say, hey, give me everything up to this equal sign with some spaces around it. Then let me find the type. Then after that last colon, give me everything else because that's the value. And depending on what your type is, the value, you might need to do more processing with that value, but that is the value. So I just grab everything and give it back to me. And then we start saying, hey, if this thing matches, emit an object for it. And that is our output handler. That's our script that we're going to run that processes the output of the SNMP walk command. So then we need to create our output handler. So we'll say use the new output handler commandlet, and we'll start to define some properties. We'll say this is for the default parameter set. So if you have multiple parameter sets that you want to use with this commandlet, because that you can, and you want different handlers for different parameter sets, you can do that. But because I only have one parameter set here and it's the default one, I only need one handler. That's all we're going to do. And then just to be safe, because this is a PowerShell script block, not a string, and when it goes into the JSON, it needs to be a string. I just go ahead and I call the handler.toString method on my script block to turn that into a string for me. That way I don't run into trouble later when I try and give this to Crescendo. And then I need to tell it what kind of handler type it is. In this case, because this is just a script block, I'm saying it's inline. Now, you can do other handler types. You can point to a script. So you could have a PS1 file that you hand the output to. But the problem with that is that PS1 file has to exist on disk. So you either have to ship that PS1 file with the module and reference it correctly inside of here, or you could have that file, sitting in a C scripts folder or somewhere on disk and reference it as well. And then that file has to be everywhere that you're going to use a module. That's a little bit more difficult to do it that way. Or you could define it as a function as well. So you could have a function out here, whatever you want to call it. And then as long as that function is available in your session, so you've sourced that function in your session, it's part of your profile, whatever, the Crescendo module will be able to find it and load it and include it in the manifest. And then that just ships as part of your Crescendo module. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. I tend to like the inline method. I used to do the function thing, but I kind of like the inline thing more nowadays when I'm doing this, because I just have to define the script block and my parsing code right here, and it just goes along for the ride. I don't have to worry about anything else. So I really like the inline method these days. And then again, then we start to doctor this a little bit. So I mentioned before when I showed this command how like the V for version doesn't have a space between the V and whatever version we're gonna going to use. So whether that's v1 or maybe it's 3 or maybe it's 2c, whatever the version is, there's no gap between the parameter and the value here. So what we're going to do is for that v parameter that we created earlier, we're going to set no gap to true. And what that's going to tell Crescendo when you run that commandlet, it's going to take the space out, take the space away. So say this was dash community, it would be no space in here. It would be C public, just straight up. And then we're going to start to add our parameters to our commandlet by specifying our command parameters. So this command object dot parameters set to our array of parameters that we defined up above. And then again, our output handlers is an array, but we only have one. So we're just going to specify that as an output handler. Pretty simple stuff. And then what we can do, once we have all that done, we can generate our JSON file.
Go, Stevie.
Well, so Stevie, so you're doing a pretty bang up job of explaining this, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of tribal knowledge here that you figured out from doing this a bunch of times. I know you've done Crescendo a bunch over the past year. So, like, the guys in the room or the people that are watching remote and they want to get started with Crescendo, where is a good place for them to find, like, intro documentation to figure out all these pieces?
So the best way to get started with Crescendo is to Google it. Microsoft. It's called Microsoft.PowerShell.Crescendo, and go to the Microsoft Learn site for it. The commandlet reference is going to be the first thing that you discover, and that's got all the documentation and all the examples for how to do things. The GitHub is a pretty good place to go. The GitHub actually has, if you look in the Microsoft.PowerShell.Crescendo folder, there's samples for a whole bunch of things. So there's some Docker stuff in here. There's some ifconfig stuff. There's some there's a couple of different CLI tools that the team has already kind of built the JSON for, so you can kind of see how the schema works out. So you can start to understand how to bolt this stuff together. And on top of that, there is.
So can I ask a question here? Like, I guess you just went to the to GitHub there and those examples of the JSONs themselves. And in that fashion, there's a couple components there. You started off with this idea of, hey, new crescendo command, and which effectively you're writing PowerShell code to basically just build the JSON. And then on that example was the JSON artifact that you output. And then from there, you then use those JSON files to then create the module that you're then going to consume, right? So there's a couple parts in the middle there, you know.
Yep, exactly. Right? Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. The workflow is, so you kind of have two workflows, right? You could either really, really understand the schema and just write it in JSON and be done, or you could write some PowerShell that defines the JSON. And then spit the JSON out with export crescendo command. That gives you the JSON. Like, this is it. And then once you have your JSON file, then you create your module. So now that we have our JSON file, we can say export crescendo module, and I've done this before, so I'm just going to tab complete it. Give it your configuration file. Tell it what you want to name the module. In this case, we're going to name the module SNMP, and if you've already generated it and you want to regenerate it, you can add the force parameter. But since we don't have the module right now, we won't do that. And then you just run it. And then all of a sudden, you get a PSD1, which is the module manifest for this new SNMP module. And it includes any commands that you created. And then you get your PSM1. Now, I'm going to open the PSM1. Nobody panic. This is auto-generated. So it's going to look funky because it uses a lot of classes to do a lot of work under the hood. And there's a lot of really, really fancy stuff going on in here. And then we get to our function, and this is what Crescendo did with that JSON file. It created my start SNMP walk function. It doesn't require elevation because that's something that you can set as an attribute so that if you run this command and you're not in an elevated shell, it yells at you. So it's kind of nice in that sense. And we don't have anything in our command line binding because I didn't set any of that stuff like confirm impact or anything. Those are all properties of the JSON that you could set, but I didn't. So it gives you just a base command line binding. And then it started to define our parameters. Now, you'll notice that all of mine are objects here. That's because I didn't like really dive into the weeds and like on my parameter objects set what type they were. You could absolutely like set each one of these to a string or an int or whatever they needed to be. You can do that, but lazy example, they're just objects because at the end of the day, everything is an object in PowerShell. And then you start getting into the code that it actually wrote. And this is where it starts to get scary because it really starts to, use boilerplate stuff that the module needs to has been defined to make it's black magic. That's what it is. Crescendo is freaking black magic, but it works and it's awesome. So now that we have this module created, we can import the module. Oops, let's say import module snmp.psd1. And now we can start playing around with start snmp walk. And then let's walk that printer again now that it's actually online. And that's from my other command. Let's do that. So hopefully it's taking its sweet time. It's doing its processing. We should start to see objects here in a second. And if this IP address doesn't work, I'll do the other one. I'll just use my Windows server because this is okay. So it did actually work, and that is way too much data. So first, let's do like the first 10 or the first. How about select first 10? And you got to be patient with SNMP and slow printers. There we go. There's our 10 things back. So now you can see instead of that really, really, really ugly output from SNMP walk, we get a PowerShell objects back. So if we wanted to, we could filter on the type and only get strings or time ticks or whatever it is. And then of course we've got the OID here and then the value. So
Hey, Steve.
that's, yeah.
What happens if you pipe that into get member?
Pipe this into get member?
Not the select. Well, select first 10 is fine, but yeah, I'm curious to see what properties the object has.
Let's find out. It should have whatever. It should come back as a PS custom object, I think. Yeah. So it's going to have the typical PS custom object stuff because that's what I defined in my output handler. So if we go back and look at the Crescendo file, we look up here when I was emitting things. So for each object, hand me back a PS custom object with those types. If this was something else, some other type, it would have handed me that type back. So it's kind of up to you to determine what the type is of the object that gets returned. So you can see here's our node properties that we defined up here, and then all this other stuff like toString, getType, all this stuff is the stuff that is inherited from it just being a PS custom object. Like we get that stuff for free.
Now, because I can read regex, I can see that you're doing, was that matching parameters? And that's how you're building your matches for OID type and value.
So I'm just doing named parameters just to make it easier for me to grab stuff later. Like that's what this means. So if I didn't do something like this, and it was just straight regex without that, matches would be an array, and I would have to index into the array to get each of the groups. So you'd have to index group 1, index group 2, and index group 3 to do it. That's annoying to me. I don't like doing it because regex has this named thing to it, like this named capture group. I like those. So that's what I'm doing here. So I just say, hey, I'm going to get my OID first, my type second, then my value last. And then when it comes time to actually get a match out of that, then the matches automatic variable is going to have those properties automatically on it from the named captures. So then you can really simply do matches.oid, matches.type, matches.value. It's easier to read. So if you're going to start playing with regex, yeah, you can do it simple stuff to start without needing to get this crazy. But once you start having to like pick apart a string and get different sections of the string for different reasons, use named capture groups because it's going to make your life easier down the road when you're actually trying to pull that stuff out, especially shell.
I think another place to bring out, and it's good that Stephen was saying, pointing out the regex at this point, but effectively the idea that you're doing a bunch of things that are not completely intuitive in, effectively line 45 through 47, where it starts, is that you just create a regex match string of some kind. And then you take the current item, which is in the $_, and then we match it, which then to the string which is above. But then at that point, it creates a matches object automatically, right? And he's just setting it to null because he doesn't want it to the output. He doesn't want to do anything with it. So he just wants to, hey, run a regex against this string, and then he's going to get a variable called matches back. But that's just going to get set in, the memory just straight up. And then after that, in 48, he then comes along and creates an object from matches. And so matches isn't defined anywhere automatically. And so if you're working with PowerShell and you're working with regex, know that if you use match, you're going to get this thing called matches. And that's what you could then reference as to was something found. And so if the variable matches at line 48 was empty, then it didn't match anything.
Yep. So
go ahead.
There's an about topic called automatic variables that details all of the automatic variables that PowerShell supports. So this is for PowerShell 7.4. If you need to use Windows PowerShell, you can go back to the PowerShell 5.1 documentation and get the list that's available there. But then you can see that the matches automatic variable, it works with the regex stuff. So if it's true or false, it gets added to the matches variable. Now, obviously, this is not great code, right? This is quick and dirty hack it together, make it work for the sake of a demo code. I wouldn't use this in production because what happens if I didn't get a match on that line? I'm still emitting an object to the pipeline that would have nothing in it. So it's kind of pointless. So I need to add some logic here that says, hey, if I get a match, spit out an object. If it doesn't match, don't do anything with it. Just throw it away. That,
I think
that,
just
that,
pointing out
that
some of
sort of thing.
that behind the scenes or just, is implied there is it's good to note that for those who aren't too familiar with even using regex and that form and the pipeline in that form. So it's a good note to have that point. And
Yeah. So, I mean, this stuff can be as complex as you need it to be, or it can be as simple as you need it to be. Like, this does what I want it to do. This solved the problem. But it could be better. Like, and perhaps, when is this this is exactly what I want. That is what I want. I'm gonna copy this. Whoa, I'm not gonna copy all that. I just want to see what this looks like because now I'm deathly curious. I'm gonna put this up here real quick. Why? Target is 1, 2, 2. Yeah. OID is what? What is that OID? That's yeah. Sweet. So now I can do something like yeah. Yeah, I could do upgrade you actually, because I can do actually will that work? I want a
you're on Mac
max.
console.
Yeah.
Oh.
What the hell?
I previewed that on Mac.
It's a Windows PF thing.
Yeah. So you can
But
do
to your point is that now you can select from there. You can double select. You can do a bunch of stuff, and you see the columns. And if it was a grid view, it'd be visual.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all kinds of stuff where you could do. So, or
you can even format list
where value match SQL, for example, and then it'll just give you all the SQL Server stuff that's on the box, like whatever. Like it's an object at this point. So if you needed to send an email with this data or convert it to an HTML table and shove it somewhere or send it to like an API for whatever reason, you could do that stuff. It's PowerShell at this point. It's an object. So I don't know. I love SNMP because it gives you so much data that you can monitor and do cool things with, whether it's, hey, I need to know if the redundant power supply in my switch is faulty or not. You can do that with SNMP. Or I need to know if the RPMs and the fans on the server are going in hyperdrive. That might be indicative of a different problem or, whatever. All that stuff is available via SNMP, and it's going to allow you to feed into things like Grafana dashboards and all this pretty nice stuff. And by the time Summit rolls around, I'm going to have all that stuff built. So this presentation is going to look really, really pretty by then. But this is a practice run, so I got to save something for Summit. I feel like I've gone 3,000 miles an hour for the past half an hour. Are there any questions from anybody that haven't been answered yet? Is anybody deer in the headlights totally confused, either in the room or via chat? Because I can absolutely take a step back and go over anything.
Yeah, I got a quick question real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, where the horse resources is, like your string, is that running in the control panel / uninstalled program? Are those programs or that's part of like services?
These
installed software. That
should be installed softwares in
Installed
add and
software.
remove
it
programs.
says
Yeah, see the software installed name dot. Yeah.
Okay.
And that just happens to be what the OID that he chose is that he just did that part, and that's what came back. So, but
Yeah,
his other
so
point is that if you chose a different OID, and I think at the beginning he talked about other sources to get those OIDs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this particular case, I'm using the SNMP walk command, which will walk from where I want or where I tell it to start all the way to the end of the MIB. So in this particular case, I want to walk the .1.3.6.1.2 blah 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 .3.1.2 tree. So if we were to emit everything before and after that, the 2.1.25.6.3, this part here, this is the start of everything returned in add and remove programs. So all of the other stuff like the .12 and it just increments up for every entry in add and remove programs. It's just going to walk that and then it's going to stop because once it gets through this, it's going to increment this to .1.3 and then it's going to be whatever's in that tree and then it's going to move on to .4 and then .5 and on down in the list it goes. So to only walk that, I'm starting at the start, the top of the tree for add and remove programs, and then it'll stop once it gets to the end.
So if you went in and you added so like that first one, the .1. So if you
Yep.
did 6.3.1.2.1, it would just do that SQL Server.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it'll. Yeah, if you give SNMP walk the exact OID, like the end of its tree, like I want this specific one, it'll give you that specific thing back. But if you
when he was constructing this string, he actually removed that last
Right.
dot number.
I just wanted to make sure that what I was seeing and what I was thinking
Yep.
basically matched. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And I should note that I've got another crescendo thing here. There's another one that we can run if we were to F8 this one, and then we can mung this together. But just to show it off here, this is good enough. There's an SNMP bulk walk as well. So if you're going to walk an entire tree, SNMP goes out to the device and for everything returns data. It's very, very network expensive to use SNMP walk to just blast a device and give me everything. It's very, very network traffic heavy, especially if you've got a really complex device with a really, really big tree. SNMP bulk walk batches it. So it goes out to the device, collects all the data, and then sends it back in one chunk. So it's a bigger payload, but it's less network traffic because it's only one back and forth. So if you're going to do this in a big network with really complex devices, or you're going to monitor, all your top of rack switches in your data center, and you've got 600 of them, you might want to look at bulk walk as opposed to SNMP walk. Enterprise Kit is going to support it. My printer hates SNMP bulk walk. It won't give back the data in bulk.
So overall, basically, SNMP, walk, and all those pieces are just an interface into SNMP effectively, right? And so the idea is that there's not really a built-in module that, hey, it's a good tool to go get some data, and you can do that for any kind of device. But then, how do you consume it? And I think that's what I think has been really valuable here from Stevie is this lesson that, hey, so now you have some this application or some process that you want to then use and consume. Well, then can you do something with it? Oh, there needs to be a module. How do I make it PowerShell? Well, that's where Crescendo can come along and you can make it do what you want. So he used his PS1 to basically create all those parts so that, hey, he can build all that, then create the JSON from there and create the module, and now he can consume it from there. And he wrote it in a way as well in which, hey, he can pass in multiple variables at this point. So like he came in before, hey, I want to get a partial of an OID. I don't want to get it just this one, and I want to change out some other variables. So he could have added additional, like the version number and all that kind of stuff, all that. It's all default, but he could have changed it all because of the way he written it, which is a very good example there. So I want to just kind of point that out for those who are kind of come back to the center here.
Yeah, but it's important to I guess mention too, especially for like security conscious orgs or like networks that may or may not have, they might be air gapped or whatever, like really heavy security stuff. SNMP v3 supports authentication and authentication with certificates. So if you need it to be a secure transmission and an encrypted transmission to, pass that data back and forth, you can use SNMP v3, and that'll allow you to have a credential.
How many devices would support SNMP v3? Would it just be the enterprise stuff, or would there be a?
Actually, my printer here at the house supports SNMP v3. It's kind of it's one of those things where it used to be that you'd have to watch, but that was way back in the day. Like anything new is going to have v3 support, and they might not have v1 support anymore. They might start at v2c support, which is just the next iteration of SNMP, and it can still be anonymous. But I think v2c, and I'd have to look it up again. It's been a minute. I think v2c supports authentication as well, but not as much as v3.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I've never had to bother with authentication in SNMP. I've never cared. I just go get it, whatever. But
so I was just going to say we're probably wrapping up here, Stevie. Does anybody have any final questions for Stevie before we wrap up for the evening? Any questions online that we didn't get to? I saw Dwayne was asking where the SNMP walk come from, and I saw Josh answer, just in case anybody didn't see it. SNMP walk is a tool itself. That's the CLI tool. Mm-hmm. And then he wrapped that with Crescendo to make it into PowerShell. In case that wasn't clear.
Yeah, so it's naturally a Linux tool, but then they make some Windows tools to do it as well. So, and of course he's on a Mac, so it's native there.
Yeah, it just works.
All right, so hey Steve, thanks a lot for sharing that with us tonight. That was awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think one of the cool things here to understand is like, if you have, put your mind to it, you really can make a lot of things work in PowerShell that don't appear to work at first, right? And so with some of the tools from the Microsoft team and some ideas from the community, you can kind of take those old legacy tools that you use in everyday walks of life and turn them into PowerShell tools with a little bit of work. And so, Steve, I want to thank you for sharing with us tonight. We're going to wrap it up here. People watching at home, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Phil, what did you think tonight?
I thought it was very interesting. I thought he went as deep as he can go, and I think he kept it just where it needs to be.
Yeah,
he did a great job.
Yeah. So if you're watching us at home, we hope you'll check us out at the next meeting. You can catch us at rtpsug.com, rtpsug.com, or on Meetup. You can look for the Research Trial PowerShell User Group. This group has been meeting for 4+ years, twice a month. We have over 150 meetings now recorded on our YouTube channel. So we hope you'll check out some of the other content we have available, and hope you join us for the next one. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. We'll see you next time. Thank you.